Okay, so I used that one example of beauty when I was talking about will, and granted, I used it because it's sort of an ethereal quality. But here's the thing about something like beauty. Okay, when you reduce it materially, you start with something beautiful and you reduce it into its parts. You always get chemicals at some point if you reduce it enough, right? But you can reduce it all kinds of ways. You take the parts in whatever chunks you want, right? But you reduce it materially. Now, whether you consider after you do that reduction the original concept of beauty that you had as an illusion or not is entirely dependent on what that concept was. If you thought that concept was beauty means that something has a metaphysical truth to it, well, you don't even need to reduce it into parts to find out that's bullshit. But if you do, you might find that that was bullshit, and you go, oh, that was an illusion. But see, what you also do is either find you didn't have that concept of beauty. I never really had that concept of beauty to begin with, or perhaps I did and I reworked it. I feel I also reworked it. I reworked it to fit what I thought was realistic. I reworked it to fit the kind of beauty that can still be there after you've reduced it. You say, well, that beauty has to come from this. Okay, well, then it must be a certain kind of a thing. For example, dependent on the observer. The guy's saying, well, it's totally dependent on the observer. No, it is not. The observer, that's like saying hunger is totally dependent on the observer. Yes, in one sense, it's because that observer is hungry. But it's not just dependent on that, it's dependent on the conditions that lead to that. Our biological evolutionary history, has is what has built this pattern machine that causes us to recognize hunger and beauty and etc. and etc. And it is just as material as the same machine that has caused us to be able to perceive red or the sound. So, yeah, when I reduce beauty, I see it as a material thing, and the chemicals that the flower reduces to, the system and the way they interact. That's all beautiful. It's its own kind of beauty, and that adds up to the beauty of the flower, in my view, and maybe not in another person's, or another person finds another flower more beautiful or less beautiful. That's where the relativity comes in. That's where, yes, of course, the observer comes in strongly. In all of these things, though, is my point. In your sense of time, in your sense of color, all of these things, the observer is the central reference point. It is always about the observer. That's why if you are colorblind, you might see an image that looks very different from the image of someone who isn't colorblind. And for all we know, you see a different image from someone who isn't colorblind. We really don't know. And the point is, it's always a little bit different, right? It's always a little bit different. Okay, so it's always dependent on the observer. Even these raw facts, even the sense things, the tangible sense perceptions we take as raw or undeniable fact, they're good enough, close enough to be undeniable. And so fine, put them in a different category, but it's a threshold-based thing. It's a threshold of how reliable they are. Not that there's some totally different thing from the sensation of beauty. Yeah, that's harder to put your finger on, but it's the same kind of thing. That's what I'm saying.